Councillor Hess is just arriving.
Why is the chairman on twice?
Because
he's logged into his laptop so he can vote.
Why is the chairman on twice?
Because he's logged into his laptop so he can vote.
Why is the chairman on twice?
Because he's logged into his laptop so he can vote.
I'm sorry, we're hearing everything twice there, like there's an echo with a 3-second delay. And
It's going to be a very strange meeting.
And the chairman is very difficult to understand a word that he's saying. We've got some echo from the room as well as an echo from his machinery, I think. Could we sort that out? Because people will need to know what the chairman's saying.
I don't know what the chairman's saying about
You'll set the dog off soon.
Someone needs to do this. I don't see.
Yeah, but your body muted as well as your microphone.
Yeah.
Laptop.
Yeah, your voice will be picked up.
That should be all right. Should be all right. Is that better? No. Oh dear. Technical problem. Are we all right?
Sounds better.
That seems to be okay, Chairman.
Is it okay?
Yep, that seems to be okay if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your forbearance. Okay, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Western Planning Committee. My name is Councillor David Beeman and I am Chairman of this committee. I'm supported this evening by officers Beth Howden-Smith, the Development Manager, Bruce Sean is not here, what is he? Chris French, who is not here, Carol Houston, who's the Planning Officer, Olivia Gorham,
We appear to have lost the chairman completely.
It's gone mute.
Oh, you must have done it yourself.
I'm back.
Try again.
Okay. Members and officers, please use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate you wish to speak. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Please can I also ask any questions to get brief and to the point. There'll be timing speeches this evening and an alarm will sound when you're speaking for 4 minutes.
Connecting. Oh, that's better.
Is that better? If any members of the meeting lose the connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them time to rejoin the meeting. If the webcast stream fails, then we will also have to adjourn until we're able to reset the connection. Right. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence and substitutes.
We have apologies from Councillor John Neal that it was a last minute apology, so we have no substitute.
Right. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. Can we just note the minutes of the meeting which have already been published on the council? Already been published? Yes, anybody have any alterations? No. But as everybody says, well, do we get a yes, have we approved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Declarations of interest. Right, any declarations of interest, Kimberly?
Yes, Councillor Simon Deere has an interest in the Crofts.
Non-pecuniary, presumably.
Non-pecuniary, it's purely because he attends the veterinary practice.
Oh, I see.
I'm just simply a customer of the veterinary practice, that's all. I don't know if they're the applicant, but I'm. They're obviously part of. They're in there somewhere. So.
Then the same, sorry. And in fact, I've added in relation to agenda item, which is on the farm one. I am a member of the Farm Town Council Planning and Licensing Consultative Group. But this, but in fact, this will not affect my judgment in this decision. And the decision is made. And in fact, I've invited anybody else to be a member of that committee, also to declare that interest, please. Anybody else wish to declare an interest in that regard? Right. Questions from members? Any members' questions?
None received, Chair.
Right. Any relevant updates to performance guidelines? Yes.
No, Chair.
Right. Move on to application planning permission. Any applications decided with delegated powers?
None to report, Chair.
Okay. Right. Fine. We'll move on to the more substantive item of the item of tonight. These applications subject to public speaking. The first one is A1. WA 2020-0430, land at Crofts, 28 Petworth Road, Haslemere, DU271HR. A proposal to erect a dwelling and alterations to access as amplified by ecology report received on 13th of August. The officer is Olivia Gorman. And can you please check, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members.
You still like going?
Keep going.
Oh, I was just waiting for you.
There you are.
Okay, thank you. So the applications for the erection of one dwelling and alterations to an existing access. If I could just quickly draw members' attention to the update sheet that you will have received at the end of last week. This set out a correction to the shortfall in parking spaces in association with the existing property 28 Petworth Road and existing car park. There's just a further update concerning the parking requirements for the existing properties within that building. Just another update to the requirements as set out on page 26 of the agenda. The lower ground floor flat referred to in the report is actually 2 bedrooms rather than 1 bedroom, and therefore the parking space requirement for that property is 2 spaces rather than 1. Therefore, there is the shortfall in parking is a total shortfall of 4.5 spaces rather than 3.5 as set out in the update sheet. However, as set out in the officer report and the update sheet, the site is located in a highly sustainable location just beyond the town centre. And therefore officers don't consider that the shortfall in parking is of significant harm to warrant refusal of the application. In addition to that update, the update sheet also set out that the National Trust were consulted on the application and have confirmed that they would not be commenting on the application as they don't consider there to be an impact on the trust. And just one further update, as set out in the officer report, the consultation response from Thames Water has been now received. They've confirmed that on the information available to date, they do not envisage infrastructure concerns regarding water supply capability in relation to the site. So they've not objected to the application. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the application proposes the erection of one dwelling, and the site is located to the northwest of Collards Lane, which is a single track road to the northeast of Petworth Road, just beyond Haslemere Town Centre. The application site lies to the rear of Crofts, just beyond the car park which serves this property. Just move to the next slide. The aerial view shown here shows the site with the blue marker on it and the surrounding properties on Collards Lane and the National Trust land to the northeast. Next slide, please. The existing site plan is shown here. The existing site comprises an existing garden area containing 2 sheds in the top corner of the site. And the site is accessed through the existing access to the car park. The existing access can be seen here on this site plan. Next slide, please. The photographs here show Collards Lane. Photograph A shows the entrance to Collards Lane, taken from Petworth Road. Photograph B is taken from along Collards Lane, showing the entrance to the existing car park, which serves Crofts. Next slide. The top photo here shows the existing access and car park with the application site seen to the rear. The photo underneath shows the northeast corner of the site taken from along Collards Lane. The existing boundary wall can be seen in both of these photos along the front boundary along Collards Lane. Next slide, please. The photographs here are taken from inside the site, showing both side boundaries. Photograph A shows the northwest boundary with the adjoining property 24A Petworth Road, seen just beyond the boundary treatment. Photograph B shows the southeast boundary of the site. That's the one that fronts onto Collards Lane. Next slide, please. The further photographs from taken inside the site. Photo A shows the rear boundary of the site and the existing sheds. Photograph B shows the front boundary, which adjoins the existing car park and faces Crofts, which can be seen in the photo beyond the boundary treatment. Next slide, please. The site plan here shows the proposed layout, the one dwelling and the repositioned access, which would be moved further along the northwest boundary. The dwelling would be provided with a driveway and private garden area. One of the existing sheds would be retained as shown in the top corner, and that would provide cycle storage. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed site plan alongside the previous proposal. There was a previous application on the site for the erection of 2 semi-detached dwellings, which was refused. The differences between the current application and the previous proposal are set out on page 16 of the agenda. Next slide, please. The proposed front and rear elevations are shown here, and the application proposes plain clay roof tiles and timber weatherboarding in addition to local stone and washed lime render. Next slide, please. The side elevations and roof plan are shown here. You can see obviously would have a front porch and rear canopy as well. Next slide, please. The proposed first ground and first floor plans are shown here. You see the internal layout proposed. The application. Next slide, please. This slide shows the front elevation as viewed from Crofts, with an indicative drawing showing the proposed boundary treatment between the application site and the existing car park. Part of the side boundary, which will front Collards Lane, can also be seen from this drawing. Next slide, please. This slide shows the side elevation as viewed from Collards Lane, with the boundary treatment shown here. Next slide, please. The main matters for consideration for members are the planning history and the differences with the previous application, impact on heritage assets, design and impact on visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, standard of accommodation and amenity space, highways, access and parking, and the impact on trees. As set out in the officer report, notwithstanding the shortfall in parking spaces for 28 Petworth Road and the loss of 5 trees and some of the hedgerow and small part of the boundary wall. The proposal would result in the creation of one dwelling within a highly sustainable location just beyond Haslemere town centre. The dwelling would have a design sympathetic to the character of the conservation area and would not result in adverse impacts to neighbouring occupiers. And as such, the officer's recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Now, two public speakers tonight on this item. We both have 4 minutes each. And the first one is, I hope I get this surname pronounced correctly. It's Victoria Metcalfe Howe. And I'll get to Victoria. Would you like to have your 4 minutes, please?
Hi, yes, it's Victoria Metcalfe Huff. Thank you.
Okay, so apologies. Go on.
Okay, sorry. Good evening, everyone. As indicated in the officer's report, there were 26 letters submitted against this proposal for a single 3-bed property, which reflects the extraordinary strength of feeling in the local community against the application. I'm speaking this evening on behalf of more than 20 of those who objected. The concerns expressed by local residents are multiple, but tonight I wish to highlight 2: the substantial harm to the conservation area and the under-provision of parking. I also note with some concern that there appeared to be some omissions and inaccurate information in the officer's report on these and other issues, although some of those she has just corrected in her opening remarks. Firstly, I contend that the proposal would result in not insubstantial harm to the conservation area. Due in part to the elevation of the plot, the proposed property would stand a maximum of 8.54 metres above Collard's Lane, higher than the previous proposal, the high elevation of which was raised by the National Trust in its objection to that application. The property would be only 1.65 metres from Collard's Lane, almost 1 metre closer than the previous proposal. According to the applicant's plans, this single property would be only 10.9% smaller in footprint than the previous application for 2 semis, not 22% smaller as suggested in the officer's report. It would result in the loss of 5 trees, impacting the tree line, the removal of a substantial section of mature hedgerow, and demolition of part of the old stone wall. Consequently, the development would dominate over the heritage streetscape and the neighbouring properties on the lane, including Grade 2 listed collards, and thus would be out of keeping with the massing, scale and character of this part of the conservation area. The footprint means it would still constitute overdevelopment of this small plot, and it would result in irrevocable loss of important natural and heritage assets in this prized part of the conservation area. Secondly, I contend that the development would result in significant under-provision of parking. The calculations on parking spaces left for the donor property that were outlined in the officer's original report were not borne out by our site inspection, nor were they consistent with the applicant's plans. The officer's suggestion in particular that the proposal would leave 11 spaces for the donor property is not borne out by the applicant's own plan, which illustrates the fact that actually there would only be 8 spaces for the donor property, and 2 of those would be blocked in, as you could see on the slides earlier. The original calculation by the officer has now noted that the basement flat is now a 2-bedroom, not a 1-bedroom, but it has not been taken account of the fact that a wall terrace was built on part of the car park subsequently. As the officer noted earlier, the proposed development would therefore result in a total under-provision of circa 4.5 spaces for the donor and the new property. The officer suggests that this under-provision can be mitigated by the availability of public parking in the town centre. I contend that an under-provision of this size cannot be mitigated by car parks that are 10 minutes walk away, are fee-paying, and which are already insufficient to meet the demand in the town centre. This under-provision of parking has a knock-on impact since it would lead to increased congestion on the lane, a single-lane dirt track, at a point less than 20 metres from the junction with Petworth Road, raising road safety concerns. In summary, I contend that the planning officer's report does not take full account of the strength of local opposition to this development on grounds relating to preservation of the conservation area, and crucially, that the assessment leading to the recommendation to improve still contains a number of inaccuracies and omissions. Notwithstanding the need for housing stock in Haslemere, I believe that the public good to be accrued from the development of a single 3-bed executive home, and I note it's not social or low-cost housing, would be outweighed by the substantial harm to the conservation area.
Big fat ones, because Billy likes.
Inadequate parking and other concerns raised by local residents. Thanks very much for your time this evening. Thank you.
Very much, Victoria. The other public speaker is Lucille Gray, who is speaking in support of the application. Lucille?
Hello there. Thank you very much for allowing me also to speak at this committee. Obviously, my name is Lucille Gray, and it's my husband and I that are making this application that you're considering. We run the vets and lived in the house that adjoined for 3 years, and we're very fond of the local area. We began this application when we observed the land next door that had been developed with a dwelling, 24A Collard's View, and due to the fact the garden simply isn't used and not easily accessible due to the presence of the car park that services the vets. Following the refusal of our first application, we have actively sought to address all the concerns raised. We've sought further specialist planning advice, and our designer, Peter Gardner, has shown great skill and care in matching the new proposal to the various styles of houses that surround the plot. We are delighted that the Town Council, the Highway Authority and the Surrey Wildlife Trust and the Environmental Health Departments have no objection to our plans. We have reduced the proposed number of dwellings from a pair of dwellings to one. A much greater space is provided for the single dwelling. These and other changes are listed on page 12 of your agenda, address each of the previous reasons for refusal and ensure that the single dwelling now proposed is not cramped nor overdeveloped and provide a high quality home with good amenity space. The addition of one dwelling would not have any material effect on the traffic entering or leaving Collard's Lane, as acknowledged by the Highways Authority, which has raised no objections. The tree report identifies no trees of any real importance. In fact, one of them is dying and will need to be removed professionally by a tree surgeon in the near future. We have made a great priority in the design of the dwelling that we do not encroach on anyone's privacy by carefully positioning the rooms and windows, and we've also adapted our original access in order to keep the hedging and the stone wall that shields the forges from our proposed dwelling. We have acted to minimise the visual impact and overshadowing. This dwelling is over 20% smaller by footprint than the previous decline plans, and we have reduced any possibly perceived impact on Collard's Lane by providing a lower eave and a hip roof on this narrow side elevation. We have endeavoured to respect the character of the area. There are various architectural styles on Collard's Lane, tile hung to wooden clad to rendered to Victorian Petworth stone. And of course, we can't aim to imitate all of these different styles in one dwelling, but we feel we've chosen the most appropriate and sympathetic design to allow this property to blend in with the others on the lane. We are pleased to note that the Historic Buildings Officer considered that our proposal fits in well with the West Surrey vernacular. We note the Haslemere Town Council's request to resurface the road, and we would be pleased to accept a condition requiring that the upper part of the lane be made good from the Petworth Road as far as down to the allotments or the National Trust Gate. We hope this will help the neighbourhood and reduce some of the residents' concerns about the road surface quality, especially on the upper part of the lane, which experiences relatively more traffic due to the vet's clinic. We feel this proposal for a single dwelling has taken on board and addressed all of the concerns previously raised by reducing the number of units, increasing the area given over to parking, increasing the amenity space provision, and significantly improving the design and use of materials. We feel the current design sits well within the site, and we're happy to embrace any conditions the council should wish to impose. We are pleased to see that the officers have recommended the application for approval, subject to conditions, and thank you very much for listening.
Right, councillors, up to you now. Now, who's going to be the first to put their hand up? Anybody wish to speak on this item?
Councillor Keane's putting her hand.
Oh, Councillor Keane. Yeah, okay. And then Councillor Deere and then Councillor Edmonds. Councillor Keane. Keane first.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just one query. I've read through the report, and there's a lot of conversation about bats and how care must be taken and everything. Have bats actually been seen on this site? Thank you.
Just have the moment.
Okay. What's it going on to left and left? See, Councillor Deere has to say first next. Councillor Deere.
Councillor Deere, while she's looking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope you're well this evening.
Let's put that way.
The last application, I think the reasons for refusal were that it was contrived, cramped, overdevelopment with poor amenity space, and contrary to some really good policies. So I think it was absolutely right that that was refused. this application seems to be to resolve a lot of those problems. It's a considerably smaller footprint than before, a considerably smaller footprint than the adjoining property 24A. I mean, Collard's Lane does consist of two-storey houses for the most part, so I think that fits in. There's what they call a sustainable location in that it's within very easy walking distance of the town centre, so there are fewer car movements than a house built further out of town. The materials seem okay with reference to the surrounding buildings, and there's a nice little bit of detail about Flemish bond brickwork and all that sort of stuff. And I haven't yet seen anything in the planning history that suggests that the principle of development here is not acceptable. The question seems to me the impact on the adjoining single-storey neighbour's property next door. And I was interested to see the photograph in the officer's report because it gave me a perspective I wasn't able to see when I visited the site. Is there any information on the height of the top of the gable, the ridge roof of the adjoining building, to be compared with what's being proposed here at all, Olivia? Question?
Sorry, Chairman, if I can quickly look into that and come back to you.
Okay, fine. But as I say, this seems to, as a matter of principle, I haven't heard any or read anything that suggests that the principle of development is unacceptable here. And as I say, this application seems to go a long way to resolving the problems that were clearly presented by the last application. But I would like a little bit more information on the height of next door, and I will be interested to hear what other councillors say before I actually decide which way I shall vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Collard's Lane to me looks like a single track lane where anybody parking on it would create quite a significant problem. I'm trying to, if I could ask someone to answer why there's a 4.5 parking deficiency. It wasn't clear to me.
Any more questions, Councillor Edmonds? That's it? Any more comments?
Sorry, Chair, no, that's fine. That's all my question.
Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Deere has said a number of things that I wish to say, but Collard's Lane leads down to the National Trust land and to the Haslemere Town Council allotments. So there is a certain amount of traffic going down there. I note the question of parking and parking spaces. Can I just refer back a couple of years to development on St Christopher's Road in Way Hill, which is outside the town centre area. But when it went to appeal, the inspector said, oh, well, it's close enough to the town centre area, therefore the parking needn't comply with that particular rule. So to me, I'm not quite sure where a 10-minute walk gets to the car park. I would have thought it was rather less. But when you look at 28 Petworth Road and the alterations that have been done over the years at the back of the house, they certainly don't go along with the idea of the listed building alongside on Collard's. It's very different. It's a very modern style, but obviously that's exactly what was required by the vets. But on the outside, it looks very modern. The major houses on Collard's Lane, the few, are all 20th century buildings with different styles. And I personally find that this fits in quite neatly with the street scene, with the Collard's Lane scene. And I do not find that the objections that were raised with the two-house plan are still there. I find that the architect's done a rather good job. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chairman. I looked at this carefully, and yes, when it was a two house application, it was obviously overcrowded. This sits back beside the other house. There's no visibility from the main Petworth Road. The only people that can possibly see it are those who go down Collard's Lane, and the people down there are the allotment holders, National Trust, and the occupiers. So there's very little outsiders driving down there. One question obviously I have is that the person objecting stated that our floor area was wrong. I like the idea of a smaller house, so I want to be assured that in fact the officer's smaller measurement of the square meters is correct. Certainly on the plan I've seen on here, it looks correct. Unfortunately, the plan is not good enough to give me the sizes, so mathematically I can't check it because I can't see it on the drawing, which is a shame, and I have raised this quality of the plan. Overall, if it is nearly 20% or just over 20% smaller, and the ridge height has only gone up by about 0.2 of a metre, then personally I think I'd be content with it, providing the design does go in keeping. And from what I can see and what I can read in the report, it does appear to be in keeping. There's a lot of pressure on putting houses into Haslemere at the moment, and I personally finding it difficult to object to one that fills in the space that is there and seems to be in keeping with the local area and is not oversized, being one building instead of two. Thank you, Chairman.
Very much. Now, I'll hand it on Councillor Hyman, but I don't think I can allow him to speak tonight because he's not substituting, is that right?
Councillor Hyman's not substituting tonight,
Right.
so unfortunately you can't speak.
And he has asked to speak beforehand, so I can't allow him to speak, unfortunately.
As a point of order, Chairman, Councillor Neil is not present and has given his apologies. So is it not possible for me to speak as I'm in attendance and have paid attention to this item?
I don't think I can, Councillor Hyman. I'm not sure I'd like to do, but I don't think I can.
The point is that we have a deadline for councillors to give apologies, and Councillor Neil's apologies were given at the very last minute. So we haven't actually allocated a substitute. So therefore you're not substituting.
And does the Constitution require that a substitute is allocated in advance, or can that be done at the meeting when the and if so, where would that be in the Constitution so I can check that?
Well, as I understand it, you've got to give so many days' notice for a substitute, and after that, it's basically my discretion.
It is down to chair's discretion.
I only would allow that before the meeting takes place and then start.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid I can't. I may wish to, but I can't. I'm a regulations. Okay.
You can but won't. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Dixon.
Yes, I just wanted to try and understand the parking issue. I think what you're saying is that the house, a three-bedroomed house, should have 2.5 parking spaces, and it's only got 2. And then also, I think you're also saying that the vet surgery had 11 parking spaces, and that's going to be reduced to 8. So I think my question is, the vets, is it a private car park, or can the local residents use the vets parking in the evening? Because obviously that makes a difference.
Am I able to answer that? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but it's a private car park. We own it, and the people, it's only for private use. So no, the local residents aren't allowed to park in it in the evening. Sorry, I don't know.
All right, no questions, Olivia. Are you ready to answer them?
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to Councillor Keen's question on bats, a preliminary ecological appraisal was carried out at the site. This identified that the shed to be removed had low bat roost suitability. An emergent survey was also carried out, which recorded no bats emerging or re-entering the building. Therefore, bats are not considered a constraint on the development. Precautionary approach to works recommended by Surrey Wildlife Trust. given that the surrounding land offers suitable foraging habitat for bats, that was considered appropriate to add to the mission.
There's a height question, wasn't there?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Deer's question on the height of the bungalow next door. Unfortunately, we're not able to get a measurement of that ridge height. It's not currently available.
No, okay, fine. It's not available. Thanks for looking. Don't worry.
Sorry, to Councillor Rubini's query on the floor areas, I double checked earlier to make sure I'd got the right measurements, and I came up with the same calculation. I think maybe if there's some discrepancy in a measurement taken by someone else, I think it may be because I hadn't included the porch and the rear canopy in the footprint calculation, as they're sort of open structures rather than sort of enclosed part of the building. So I think that may be where the discrepancy has come up. But yes, to confirm that the figure given in the report is, yeah, I'm sure that that's correct.
Thank you.
Right, I've got another. Can I ask you to speak?
Oh, sorry.
Can I ask?
Yes, I'd like to know if this was approved, what arrangements would be made for trade vehicles, because we all know that a lot of trade vehicles arrive at site during construction phase. So I'd like to know what arrangements would be made, because I think the Petworth Road is quite a busy road. And the other question was about the surfacing of Collard's Lane, whether it would be a permeable surface, so you didn't get a huge runoff onto the Petworth Road. Perhaps that could be answered. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, can we just have one moment?
Sure. Catherine, should you want to speak?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would point out that the Collard's Lane runs downhill from Petworth Road to the National Trust land. That's point number one. And the question that was asked about the ridge height was 14 centimetres taller, which is 6 inches, which is not a great deal. Thank you.
Have you done anything?
Sorry, Chairman,
Yes,
just a
right.
moment. Sorry, can I just clarify the question regarding surfacing and vehicles accessing the site?
Yeah.
Was that you're asking construction vehicles? Is that? Yeah. And regarding the materials of the site, that was the site itself and not the road you were talking about. Is that correct?
No, I was talking about the actual lane, because there was an offer to resurface it.
Could I intervene here? I don't think you can impose a condition regarding the surfacing of the lane, because it's outside the red line owned by the developer.
Thank you, Barry. I think an offer made, hasn't it, outside the planning conditions? Right, anybody else wish to speak?
Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, just regarding the concern about construction vehicles, we
Yes.
can add a construction transport management plan condition. To
Do that anyway, yes.
yeah.
Beth? No better than that. Okay, right. Anyone else we should speak for? Okay. Okay, right. Right, let's go to the recommendation. That's subject to conditions 1 to 17 and informs 1 to 15 permission be granted. Can I please put the report? And can I ask anybody who's not a member of the committee if they're not allowed to vote? Thank you.
And the addition of that condition regarding the.
Well, it can be a condition, can it? No,
can add a condition about the trade vehicle,
Oh, yeah,
construction
yeah,
vehicles, so that would be
yeah.
an additional.
Yes, indeed.
Extra condition.
Yeah.
Oh, it should be first standard. Okay. So on that, can we vote, please?
Councillor Keane, can you tell me how you're voting?
For.
For. So just sharing the results there, Chairman. That's
Right. Okay, well, that permission is granted. Thank you very much. Got spoke publicly. Can we on to the next item, please? Which is another one, land coordinates 483 477 143 666 Downlands Hill Road, Lower Bourne. The erection of dwelling and associated works for revision of WA 2020-0256 at land coordinates 483 477 143 666. Carl Houston is the officer. Could you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members.
Sorry, bear with me one moment.
This application is for the erection of a detached dwelling with associated works, including the demolition of a number of existing outbuildings and the retention of one outbuilding. Next slide, please. This slide shows the location plan. To the east, you can see where Gardeners Hill Road is, and then where the private road, Frensham Court, joins this road, which is where the site is accessed off. Next slide, please. So this is the aerial view, where to the northwest you can see the built-up area boundary of Recklesham, and to the northeast is the Baker Oaks housing development. You can also see the character of the wider surrounding area within the context of the countryside. Next slide, please. So photo A is taken towards the end of Frensham Court and close to the site access. Straight ahead over the bridge is the garden of Garden Cottage, the adjacent dwelling to the site. Next slide, please. Photo B shows the approach up to the side entrance. Again, Garden Cottage, Garden Cottage's garden is on the right. Next slide, please. Photo C shows the existing entrance, which will be utilised for the proposal, and shows the existing hard standing as well. The top left, you can see an ornamental orchard, which forms part of the wider site in the blue line. Next slide, please. Photo D is looking up the site from the access, which again shows the existing hard standing that's there. It also shows an existing caravan on the right, and right at the top is one of the outbuildings proposed for demolition. Next slide, please. Photo E shows the only outbuilding that will be retained as part of the proposal, essentially, and then to the left is that outbuilding again, which will be demolished. The photo also shows the dividing wall on the right between Garden Cottages and the application site. Next slide, please. Photo F is looking back down south towards the site entrance. You can see in the distance the existing dwellings of Frensham Court. Next slide, please. photo G is taken at the top of the site, approximately where the dwelling would be located. Next slide, please. And then photo H is sort of taken from the northwestern corner of the site, which gives another view of where the dwelling would be located. You can also see sort of in the background the retained outbuilding in sort of proximity to the proposed dwelling. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed front and rear elevations of the dwelling. It's of a moderate Balkan mass of single-storey stature that utilises roof space for first floor accommodation. Next slide, please. These are the side elevations. Yeah, next slide, please. This is the internal layout at ground floor level. Next slide, please. And this is the internal layout at first floor level. Next slide, please. So this is the overall proposed site plan. You can see the areas shaded in grey are where outbuildings currently are and the ones that are proposed to be demolished. You can also see where the dwelling will be located within the site, and also the little grey dots which you may see are trees that are existing. Next slide, please. So the matters for consideration are the land use, which is, as stated in the officer's report, the loss of the default agricultural land would be acceptable as it is not of the highest grades. Furthermore, officers are satisfied the dwelling would not be isolated or in an unsustainable location in the context of the wider area, including the built-up area of the north. The impact on the countryside beyond the greenbelt and coalescence, officers satisfied that the intrinsic character and beauty would be respected as the site does not have a natural undeveloped character. Instead, it already has an appearance of a domestic curtilage. Furthermore, there would be a net reduction in built form at the site. The design impact on visual amenity and the impact on a potential non-designated heritage asset is also for consideration. The proposed dwelling would not be visible from the non-designated heritage asset, and as such there would be no harm to it. Officers further consider the bulk, mass and scale would be appropriate for the plot. Impact on residential amenity. Owing to the separation distances, approximately 100 metres from the dwellings to the south and 19.5 metres from the dwellings to the east, officers satisfied this would not cause a loss of amenity. Access is also a matter for consideration. Officers do note the concerns raised in relation to the use of the bridge, which you may have noted from the neighbour representations near the entrance of the site, and the weight this bridge can hold, and the use of the whole Frensham Court, a private road for construction as a whole. As the bridge and road are privately owned, the council as local planning authority and the county council as county highway authority have no control over or method of enforcing restrictions in relation to size of vehicles used or over any potential damage to the private road and bridge. Matters such as this are civil matters in which local and county authorities cannot become involved. Officer satisfies that the principle of using the existing access to access the dwelling is appropriate. And then impact on trees. The site is a total tree stock of 54 trees. That's included the trees in the blue line. 4 trees are U-graded and only 2 trees are proposed for removal. These are 2 of the U-graded trees and they're removed for safety concerns. So there would be 52 remaining trees. Biodiversity, no objection was raised by Surrey Wildlife Trust regarding biodiversity at the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. 3 public speakers for this item. There's going to be Neil McCausland, we've got your surname right, an objection. Neil, would you like to have your 4 minutes, please?
Thank you. We object to this planning application and the proposal by the council to approve it. The basis of the recommendation is flawed with many factual errors and we think is therefore invalid. The dimensions used by the planning officer in determining his judgments are wrong. The recommendation states that the development is over 100 metres away from Courtyard Cottage. In reality, from the new parking to the cottage, there is 35 metres. Between the dwellings, 83 metres. Between the deck and the cottage, 78 metres, all substantially less than the 100 metres quoted, and the basis of the planner's decisions around loss of amenity. In point 11 of the recommendation, the planner notes the linkage of the proposed development to the built area in Recklesham and Baker Oak Stables, 70 and 36 metres respectively, and similar distances to Courtyard Cottage. But in point 13, he represents that this will not add to coalescence. We don't understand that. In point 12, he states the site already has a certain level of development, including an existing entrance, hard-standing fencing and buildings. That means that the site does not have natural undeveloped character. This development consists of largely broken down sheds. So the inference here is that every allotment or field with a broken shed more than 4 years old is a target for development, which we think is a bad precedent. In point 14, he notes that the Victorian character and attractiveness of the estate, and then he goes on to say that something like an industrial unit is going to be in keeping. If you look at the picture of the prefabricated house in the application, you'll see why we don't think it's in keeping. Point 15, as noted above, the dimensions are wrong. In addition, an unrestricted elevated view from between 35 and 83 meters away would be considered great seats in most venues. From the best front row seats to the center of the London Olympic Stadium, it's 68 meters. So the opinion on loss of privacy is just not correct. And the developer could so easily have fixed it by orientating the building east-west and by having no windows or doors on the southern or eastern elevations. In point 20, the developer cannot comply with the council's guidance and leave his bins across the bridge. The site is accessed by a private road owned by others and only has rights of access. The council cannot presume rights of use of third parties' property, so the informative is therefore incorrect. But more generally, the access to this site is simply inadequate. It's going across 3 separate rights of way, one being a very narrow and weak bridge with a 2-ton limit, then over a grass field used for grazing horses. Nothing bigger than a small car can access it. A fire engine, an ambulance, a construction lorry could not reach the site. And the parents up the drive are selling their house. The idea of using their house as a staging area for construction works does not work. Throughout the recommendation, the planner has pointed out the areas in which the development complies with the local plan and the policy document, but he hasn't taken into consideration the areas where it doesn't. I'm not going to read them all out. They're detailed in the speech, which is on the website, but in total, approving this application will break 19 of your own policies. Policies designed to protect the character of the area, the environment and residents. Policies presented in a referendum only last year and approved by a significant margin. If despite this, you're still able to approve this application, the voters will surely wonder what the point was. Notwithstanding all of this, if you can still approve this development, then in doing so, you must surely protect the development's neighbours, the environment, amenities as much as possible and apply further conditions as follows. 1, loss of privacy. Require the developer to orientate the main elevations east-west with no windows or doors on the south or east elevations. 2, protection of the ambient conditions. Extend condition 10 to include noise and also require the developer to soundproof external plant and put automatic blackout solutions to windows and doors. 3, build in keeping with the area. Require the developer to use only materials and styles of design and construction that are already used in the main dwellings of the estate. 4, use of land. Require the developer to present his debris and refuse either on his own or public land. We urge you to reject the application and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Second speaker is Vicky Drinter, who wishes to speak in support of the scheme of the application. Vicky?
Yeah, just to introduce myself, my name is Vicky. I'm the partner of Matt, who is the applicant. We hope that having read the planning officer's report, councillors are able to see the positive contribution that this proposed dwelling will bring to the area. There are a few points that we wish to highlight to the committee today, either that didn't form part of the report or that we wish to add significance to today. Just to talk a little bit about the site, the beauty of the site and local area we feel will be improved by the removal of the dilapidated mobile homes and sheds along the existing driveway. The street scene will also be improved upon by removal of the mobile home, which neighbours have also noted is an eyesore. The removal of the sheds in the wooded northern boundary will not only enhance the setting by reducing the bolting spread by 2/3, but improve the overall habitat for wildlife. The existing sheds have started to collapse and are contaminating the ground with broken asbestos roofing and glass. The site is within already an established cluster of houses, and the proposed position of the home, as highlighted in the officer's report, is a significant distance away from other properties. The site also benefits from existing double boundary in all directions, meaning the development will not negatively impact on neighbours' amenities. The site is essentially a garden without a house and is the only site on the estate that has not been changed to residential use. The site already has an existing driveway and hard standing for 3 vehicles. And as the officer has noted, the estate as a whole is not considered to be of heritage value. Just to talk about the design, as the officer has noted, the council will take a positive approach that reflects the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which is the reason we have chosen to propose a kit house designed by award-winning Scottish architects. It offers a simple, low-impact rural design which will blend into the landscape and natural contours of the site. The proposed dwelling is a modest size and its modern structure will make it highly energy efficient. To minimise energy use, the proposed dwelling has south-facing glazing to allow natural thermal gain and increase natural lighting. To further enhance its overall sustainability, the proposed dwelling will use an air source heat pump which is renewable and low carbon. The structure is fast to construct, the main structure taking only 5 weeks until it is watertight. It uses 50% less timber than traditional builds and creates minimal waste on and off site, lessening the impact on the environment and the surrounding residents. High quality materials have been selected for the exterior, which include oak cladding, slate tiles and energy efficient glazing. In response to comments about the design not being in keeping with the local area, we would like to point out that these same materials have been used in other development extensions along Frensham Court. The existing houses along Frensham Court use a range of materials and no one house is the same. Access. We note the concerns from neighbours about the access, and as much as we are aware this is a civil matter, we do wish to highlight to councillors that we have unrestricted right of way to the site from the highway on foot or in any vehicle. The access has been used consistently by our family for the past 10 years in a range of vehicles with a load of up to 8 tonnes. There will be limited additional traffic to and from the site as it's constantly in use already. We note objections raised over the bridge, which form part of the access. This is actually a solid reinforced concrete culvert with ornamental stone sides. Any concerns will be addressed in an approved construction management plan with permission granted this evening. There are numerous options available to mitigate concerns from the owner of the culvert. For example, a steel sleeve could be inserted as a permanent fixture. An ecology appraisal has been submitted as part of this application. We agree and accept all conditions set out by the planning officer. Our aim is to protect and enhance the biodiversity of the site. We have spent the last 10 years maintaining and improving the orchard, which of course will continue. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hope that councillors will agree with us and the officer that this proposed dwelling is in keeping with the local area and its intrinsic character and will provide a positive contribution rather than the site being left in its existing condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And finally, we have Paula Dunsmore, who wants to speak about Farnham Town Council. Paula, good evening to you.
Good evening, councillors, and good evening, everyone. Councillor Dunsmore representing the Town Council. My speech won't be very long, I'm afraid. So Farnham Town Council objects to the erection of this dwelling in this particular location. We're aware it's located outside the built-up area boundary of Farnham and the neighbourhood plan. But the development is contrary to a number of the policies and the neighbourhood plan. Those specifically, and I'll list them very briefly, FNP1, FNP10 and FNP11. This also includes the Farnham Design Statement, which I'll come back to, and the LPP1 policy RE1. Farnham Town Council object because of the access is inappropriate for additional vehicles and movements for a permanent residency, and this would have a negative impact on the neighbours' amenity with increased vehicle movements. Going back to those, the design statement and FNP1, I understand from the other spokesperson there's a design architect's building. But when you look at the properties and the buildings around, Frensham Court is a very character building, and this proposal does not sit within the policies and the design statements that we have agreed and had been voted on. I'd also like to bring to the attention that Farnham Town Council are asked this committee to object to this proposal on a number of these policies that we have worked hard to have and to share and to adopt. I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say on the matter. That yeah, we asked the committee to object to this planning approval.
Thank you very much, Paula. Right, councillors, anyone who should speak on this item? I'm sure there must be somebody. Who's going to put their hand up first, Alan? Councillor Edmonds. Good evening, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions. The first and probably the most important question is, do emergency vehicles have access to this site under all weather conditions? The second question is, I'm not sure why this design complies with policy D4. There also seems to be quite a lot of light pollution coming from the property, which is against the development plan.
Answer that now, Carl.
Do you mind repeating the point about policy D4? Sorry. Okay.
Yes. Yes, I can't understand why the design, as I can see from the submission, complies with policy D4, design and layout.
So I would say we've had comments from our conservation officer who sort of commented on the overall sort of appearance of the wider estate, which obviously is quite an attractive estate. She specifically noted that the sort of the wooden appearance of the dwelling would be in keeping with the sort of structures around and would sort of represent a sort of barn-style outbuilding, which would be in keeping with the area. So I think it is a sort of a subjective planning opinion, which I'm satisfied, the officer's satisfied that it would comply with policy D4 in that respect.
Sorry, it's not subjective, it's an objective confirmation that it complies with the development plan.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be aware that a lot of planning and especially design policies, such as D4, where it requires proposals to be appropriate to the site, to be of a design and materials which respect the local distinctiveness. These are fundamentally subjective concepts. And as Carl has set out, we are satisfied that policy D4 is complied with. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree, obviously.
Councillor Coburn. Muted, my friend.
Sorry, Chairman. I did not call this in, although it's given us the address of Lower Bourne. It actually comes under Ecclesham and Rowledge, but it really abuts Shortleaf and Boundstone as well. It's a site that's always been difficult to define, and usually 6 of us turn up saying we're all involved in it. I just think this is completely inappropriate. We have spent 8 years or whatever doing the neighbourhood plan. We've done it twice. We've been out to consultation 4 times. Consultation that we have walked all over the town to make sure people are aware of, that we've had meetings, we've done absolutely everything. So we have not likely plucked anything that's in the neighbourhood plan out of the air. Every inch has been walked, it's all been studied. When we did the built up area boundary, we took a pragmatic approach. And when we just reviewed the plan recently, we took a pragmatic approach. So if something had happened, like the Baker Oats on appeal, we did amend the boundary, because what is the point of not doing that? But the boundary is there for a reason, and it's the old boundary of the old countryside beyond the green belt. And the reason we put it there is because we do not want parts of the town to encroach on another part of the town in certain places. And we have a policy for this, FMP 11, and it states very, very simply that we don't want any coalescence between certain settlements, including Boundstone, Recklesham, Rowledge, and these areas. We want them to remain discrete as areas. We've got sites for as many houses and more as we need, so we're not short of housing sites. And to have a site even considered like this is really, to me, a little bit frustrating, because I know the built-up area boundary doesn't say you cannot build. We wouldn't be able to sustain that, but it does say you must have a good reason to build. We've seen the site, it's untidy. Now, you can tidy a site up without having planning permission. You don't need a planning permission to realise that you've got some eyesores on site. But I really don't think that just because there's a few eyesores on a site that's inside the countryside beyond the green belt, outside the built-up area boundary, that it's acceptable to say, well, you know, it's better than what's there, really. This area is green. The whole of Gardeners Hill Road, when you go down it, we've had all this discussion before, it's a very green road. Usually it's a very wet green road because it's got loads of springs and they come up all the time. It's a very bendy road, but it's a lovely road in its own way. And it is right outside, just outside the built-up area boundary. And it's a lovely route into Rowledge and Frensham and beyond. That's what it's for. And if we don't protect these sites that are beyond the built-up area boundary, as the first speaker says, what the heck was the last 8 years for? You know, we've put these policies in. We haven't plucked them out of the air, as I said earlier. We have thought them through. We had a professional planning consultant. We had a planning QC to tell us what we could do and what we couldn't do. So as far as I am concerned, and I didn't call it in, so I'm surprised somebody else isn't making these points ahead of me, it is contrary. The gentleman mentioned 19. I haven't actually counted up, but it's certainly contrary to policy FNP 11. I know FNP 10 has been difficult at appeal, but that doesn't mean we don't still support it at appeal. We've got FNP 1, which is the overall design policy, which we look at for everything. But, you know, if we don't protect these areas that are just on the outskirts of the built-up area boundary, the next one comes and the next one comes, and so it goes on. And you join up all the settlements that we are desperately trying to keep discreet. The whole point of Farnham is it is a network of settlements. I'm sure other towns are as well. But you're very proud of where you live. You say you live in Badshot Lee, or you live in Rowledge, or you live in the Bourne. You don't say you live in Farnham necessarily. Don't say North or South Farnham. You know where you are loyal to, and that is your original village, which is what it was. And if we just turn this into one amorphous mass of new housing because there's a little space here in the countryside, then we are just going to join the whole lot up, have nothing special about our town. So I think we should defend this on the basis that it's outside the built-up area boundary. It is countryside beyond the green belt. It is agricultural. It hasn't got a residential use at the moment, and I think it should stay green as part of our neighbourhood plan, as it was always intended. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Deere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have more sympathy with the conclusions drawn by the planning officer as to the acceptability of this in principle. But once again, I disagree with the conservation officer. I rarely agree with conservation officers. They seem to be far too conservative in conservation areas and far too adventurous outside conservation areas. I don't really mind what this is made of, and it may be the finest materials in the world, but I think the appearance is brutalist, frankly. It appears, as far as the sections are concerned, or at least the side elevations show that there's been an extension added, as you know, to the design as part of the original, as part of the present proposal. It seems to be deeply unattractive, and whilst that is a matter of complete subjectivity, I really don't like the look of it at all, I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I'm repeating what others have said already, but just make the point that dereliction and untidiness is not an excuse or a reason for granting planning permission. when I look at the design, I know it's subjective, but it's totally out of keeping with that area. I've had a look, and I was appalled at what I saw. The access is a problem. I do wonder whether emergency vehicles could ever get there if anything was developed on that land. So I agree with the people from Farnham that this is just unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I agree what my colleague Councillor Coburn says. It is very important that we support the Farnham town plan and the design statements that we've put in place. So if this goes against those, then we have to turn it down.
It's either Councillor Rubini or Councillor Keane.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's Councillor Rubini. I agree that unfortunately this area doesn't seem to be able to have a house on it. It's a green area. The neighbourhood plan I love. I don't understand why, as Councillor Coburn said, we go to all this trouble of getting the community together, of getting it passed, and then people just to say, no, well, that doesn't really count. I disagree entirely. I think this house cannot be built there, mainly because of the neighbourhood plan and the local council's rejection of it. So I will be voting not to go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. This application actually falls within my ward, but I can also deny that I called it in. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. I did make a site visit over the weekend, and I also read all of the 21 neighbour responses, despite, in fact, some of them not being from neighbours at all, but that's by the by. However, it was the letters from the 4 properties closest to the site that did raise some substantive issues, which certainly gave me cause for concern. However, on reading the 26 conditions which would apply to this application if granted, I must say that the extent to which they have addressed the material planning issues raised by the interested parties is quite commendable. I'm a great supporter of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and what it does to protect the interests of good planning within Farnham. But I do think the extensive conditions have some way addressed the issues that Farnham Town Council has raised. However, I do have a problem with the design of the house. I do agree with the previous speakers. Despite what the applicant says, it just does not fit. I do think, however, there should be the right to build something here, as it's the only part of the estate that doesn't have a house on it. But I would suggest, maybe I shouldn't suggest, but if the applicant was to come back with a different design, I might think differently, but I would be minded to refuse this one.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I fully support Farnham Town Council's position on it. And I'd just like to make an observation about the planning drawings. You know, in this day and age of software packages which allow 3D visualizations, etc., if an applicant wants to present a design in a favourable way, this is not the way to do it. These drawings are just not detailed enough, and they don't commend the design of the building to me whatsoever. But nevertheless, that's an aside, really. I just support the Farnham Town Council position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? You wish to have any summary, Beth or Carl? No? Okay, right. Well, we might as well go to the recommendation that subject to conditions 1 to 26 and in comments 1 to 8, permission be granted. Can I have the voting, please?
Councillor Keane against.
Muted. So that's 11 against and 2 abstentions.
Right, okay. Then we need an alternative proposition. So we're going to propose that we refuse this application and then we can discuss what grounds that may be. Yes, Councillor Coburn, I can see you.
Yeah, well, I propose that the permission is refused. I have a seconder.
I'm sure. Anybody wish to second? Councillor Hess, Councillor Mark, oh yeah, Councillor Hess is first, I believe. Okay, right, we've got to have reasons now. Obviously, I think the point's been made about the town neighbourhood plan, FMP 1, FMP 11. Anything else left we need to put into this? I look to you for wisdom. Good wisdom.
Sorry, I've raised my hand twice, both
Oh,
ways.
sorry, I do apologise. Yes, you did.
All right, I did it electronically, then I sort of came in with the old pen. So.
I wasn't looking, I do
No,
apologise.
don't worry. I think this is contrary to neighbourhood plan policies FMP 1, FMP 10, protect and enhance the countryside, FMP 11, preventing coalescence. In that policy, we do say specifically Rowledge and Recklesham. We also say Rowledge and Boundstone, in case anyone wants to query the site, and Rowledge and Frensham. So, you know, that is an actual policy designed to protect this gap. And what else do I think? The design statement. So I'm going through the neighbourhood plan, but I also think it's against local plan policy RE1, protecting the countryside, and probably TD1, but I'll let other people add to what I've already said.
Words?
Chairman, Beth, could we go into breakout room, please?
Yeah, okay, we are just going to breakout room. Okay, Councillor Beanie, we have to go into breakout room with
So it'll be Councillor Coburn,
Yes.
Councillor Hess,
Councillor Coburn, Councillor Hess,
Beth, Carl,
Beth, Carl. We're going to breakout
Barry.
room. Where will we do that? How do we do that?
and Barry.
And Barry as well. Okay. Okay. Right. How do you do that?
But Fiona will put it into a breakout.
Okay. Good. Very good. We'll be back shortly.
Sorry, what's going on?
We're going into
We're going into a breakout room.
I mean,
I've no idea what that means.
well, generally, the new planning committee, if there's a decision we need to review, theoretically we have to go into a breakout room, and Beth has requested that we do so. So therefore, we'll be back, don't worry. I hope so.
She's just setting it up.
Okay, join now, yes.
You should be getting an invite to join the break.
As a point of order, Chairman, are we able to, I'm not a member of the committee, but are we able to go into exempt effectively without taking a vote of the committee on going into exempt? It seems to me to be unconstitutional to simply carry out part of a meeting as we are still in the meeting. It hasn't been suspended or voted upon.
Councillor Hyman, if I can just come in, it's Fiona Cameron. They haven't gone into exempt. They will come back. It's the equivalent of the conversation sort of at the dais to clarify what the reasons for refusal are, and then they will come back and present those to the committee. It's not going into exempt. It's just withdrawing for a short while. In the same way as for example, the licensing committee would do. So
absolutely, but we've got the hear and be heard, haven't we? In the coronavirus regulations is I suppose what I'm also querying. But we'll take that outside of the meeting, I think. But this has happened a few times and I certainly don't think it's within the spirit of the law, and I don't think it's something that we are able to interpret from what I've looked from having looked at the law. I don't think that we can interpret it ourselves any other way than if members are talking to each other and discussing issues that are planning issues during the meeting, they have to be able to hear and be heard. That's the point I'm making. But
and they will come back from the breakout room and present those, explain those reasons.
Yes, but it's the same. It's the same as making a decision, running off into a smoke-filled room, and as we, if we were in the council chamber. But the law does require that we certainly wouldn't be able to do that. And Councillor Hess isn't on the dais or whatever, is he? So, and neither is the lawyer. I'm just thinking that it might seem it might put us in a difficult position if there were a challenge. That's all.
Well, they are not making the decision in the breakout room. They're just clarifying the wording of the proposed reasons for refusal, which is why Councillor Coburn and Councillor Hess are involved, because they have proposed the recommendation to refuse and seconded. So they are in effect responsible for composing the proposed reasons for refusal, which will be put to the rest of the committee to vote upon.
Sorry, Fiona.
Absolutely.
I'm a bit, if I can just ask as well, I'm a bit, I don't quite understand why they're doing that. That's not happened before.
No, it's not happened before. In Western. No, it is the agreed procedure. It has been applied in Eastern. So I must obey that, actually, yes.
But the question is whether it's lawful and whether it's proper to do so. And I think you should have
in the past,
Councillor,
I've done this openly in every meeting of the Western. I've been requested, and in fact, it is the regulation that I have to go through the breakout room to define the wording. But I can assure you, when we come back, everybody will be able to vote on whatever is said. My assurance to you. Can we then start the breakout room? Yes.
Can I just ask, why would they be doing it on this occasion, but not on every other occasion when we've gone through this process? What's different about this occasion that makes it necessary for them to go through this process?
Beth, I've been requested by you to go to the breakout room, and that was what was agreed in these temporary planning committees. I will assure you again, Councillor, and everybody else, that just for the agreement of the wording, yes, everybody else will come back and have an opportunity to vote and have a discussion if they so wish. Right. Carl, you're not invited yet. No, I haven't. Oh dear. Come on.
So, Chairman, may I ask, how long are they allowed to carry on with this conversation?
Yeah, it'll only take a few moments.
But how long do you define a few moments? 5 minutes?
Well, that is not defined, but less than 5 minutes, I would hope.
Sorry, I'm not suggesting that this is wrong in any way, but I just don't understand why this process would be happening on this occasion that is different on this occasion to every other time.
Yeah. And then,
in fact, Councillor Hunt, I would like to stress that in the past we've not been doing it by the agreed method, have we? Well, I've been trying to keep it in the open. I've been requested by Beth to bring it into the breakout room, and I cannot break that request.
So, Chairman, if I could just assist, I personally asked if we could go into breakout room just to thrash out a form of words that would be acceptable, taking on board your comments, members. That's simply what it is. When we come out of breakout, those words will be read to you, and you can add or take away from that as you see fit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. No, you're still not here. No. Fiona, we've lost Carl, and Carl's trying to speak, but I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think we should define how long these breakouts can take.
I totally agree with you, Councillor Evans. It's not the most preferred option that I have, actually, but one.
Yeah, and actually sometimes it's easier if we've heard the deliberations, we can come to a conclusion on the comments quicker, whereas...
Yeah, Councillor Dixon, I'm only following the request and the agreement on the procedures. And it's not ones I feel very happy with, but I agree with. I agree with Councillor Adams. We should define this. Get into the breakout room. Yes. Correct. Right. We're still not about using the car. No.
Have you gone in?
Chairman, I think it's time that the Democratic Services Officer went into the breakout room and told them time's up.
I think someone should tell us who should be held accountable for this, because it is completely contrary to our constitution and to the coronavirus regulations. I really think we should stop abiding by the law, shouldn't we?
Yeah, Councillor Adams, we have been discussing. We weren't responsible for being put in or for coming out.
Anyway, we're back now.
We have been discussing the application.
I've got a phone.
Are we supposed to go back into the breakfast room, the breakout room?
No. I'm not echoing you again. Down.
There may be very good reasons for this, but we are in danger, I fear, on a publicly available platform of looking like we don't really know what we're doing.
Exactly.
We're struggling to find
Can you hear me now?
Answer.
Can you hear me now? Yes, no.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank God for that. I was going to finish that. Yeah, right, okay. Right, we have to discuss this in a form of words, just Beth. Oh, Carl's got a form of words which has not been discussed in the breakout room. I can assure you that. I'm sorry, I apologise for that. It's not the practice, I think, from the breakout room, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, Carl, form of words, please, and then we can debate it. So, have you noticed that Councillor also suggested D1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got two reasons for refusal which relate to coalescence and the design. So the first reason for refusal would be the proposal, by virtue of its location outside the built-up area boundary within the countryside beyond the greenbelt, would result in harm to the landscape character of the area and give rise to coalescence between Rowledge, Recklesham and Boundstone, contrary to policy RE1 and TD1 of the 2018 local plan, FNP 10 and FNP 11 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan 2017, and retain policies D1 and D4 of the 2002 local plan and the Farnham design statement. The second reason would be the proposal, by virtue of its design, fails to respect the local distinctiveness of the area, contrary to policy TD1 of the 2018 local plan, FNP1 and FNP10 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan 2017, and retain policies D1 and D4 of the 2002 plan and the Farnham design statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we can just debate that now. Anybody wish to speak? Councillors, up to you.
Do you want to vote on the proposal?
Oh, I want to give an opportunity to speak. Does anybody wish to speak to that revised refusal? Which is proposed by Councillor Coburn, seconded by Councillor Hess. Yes? Is everybody happy with that? Nobody wants to speak? Okay. Well, we'll move to the vote then. Can we vote on that amended proposal, please? No, I've voted, yeah. Has everybody voted?
Councillor Keane, can you tell me how you're voting? Possibly lost Councillor Keane, so that's still fairly conclusive. 9 votes in favour of refusing. So that's 9 favours for the alternative recommendation to refuse planning permission, none against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, well, therefore, the vote is on those grounds. I do apologise for the slight misunderstanding. I've tried, I want to make the point, and I'll make it again, that the standard procedure of this is that people go into breakout rooms. We haven't done that in lesson because I prefer it to be done in open and transparent actions, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, I'd like to make that quite clear. Anyway, since there's nothing else on the agenda for private progress in public, and that concludes this evening's interesting meeting. I appreciate your forbearance. Thank you, and good night from Godalming. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Good night.
Good night.